Hi everyone, miss you lots. Okay, we are going to be working on a CKLA lesson. It is lesson 5 and it begins on page 88. So to begin this lesson, we have a couple pages of some language review stuff from our poetry unit, but so it doesn't start with a new vignette or anything. We'll be rereading one in a couple pages, but first we have some review. So on page 88, this whole page and the next are reviewing something that we learned from our poetry unit, and that was similes and metaphors. Okay, so hopefully you remember what that is. I think it's actually been reviewed before, like I think we had it in another unit sometime, but I can't remember exactly when. But I feel like we went over this recently. I think even in our geology unit, actually, we talked about similes again. So, remember, metaphors and similes both compare, but similes compare things using words like or as. For example, she's as pretty as a flower. Okay, I'm comparing somebody's beauty to a flower using the words as in that one. She's as pretty as a flower. Metaphors compare two things, but you don't say like or as. So neither of those words for a metaphor, just for a simile. So if I was going to use the same one, if I want to compare somebody's beauty to a flower, I would just say she is a flower to make it a metaphor, okay? So for each one of these, there are 6 on these pages, this page and the next one. It has a phrase for us, and we have to decide what the meaning is, like what they actually mean, what the literal meaning is, not the figurative meaning that they write down, and then decide whether or not it is an example of a metaphor or a simile. Okay, so the first one is done. Number 1 said, "I'm so hungry I could eat a horse." So they don't literally mean they're gonna go over there and eat that horse. It means I'm very hungry, right? That was one that we had talked about quite a bit when we started this concept and poetry unit. And the type of figurative meaning, so it is a metaphor. I'm so hungry I could eat a horse. Okay, so there's no like or as. They're comparing how hungry they are to eating a horse. Okay, number 2. It's raining cats and dogs. So what does that mean? It doesn't literally mean that cats and dogs are falling from the sky, as cool as that would be, because I would probably have a lot more pets. It means it's raining a lot. A lot is 2 different words. There should be a space there. Okay, so it's raining a bunch. What type of figurative language is that? It's raining cats and dogs. There's no like, no as, so it's a metaphor. Okay. Number 3, I'm frozen with fear. So if somebody tells you I'm frozen with fear, then that means they are very scared. I'm just gonna write very scared. I'm not gonna write a whole sentence. And metaphor or simile? No like, no as, metaphor. So they're comparing their fear with being frozen. Number 4, clouds like marshmallows. Okay, so what does that mean? How are clouds like marshmallows? So maybe that can mean the clouds are white, because marshmallows are white. Maybe it means clouds are fluffy, or both. Marshmallows are kind of fluffy. So whatever you think. Clouds are white and fluffy, or puffy, or marshmallowy. I don't think that's a word though. Okay, and is that a simile or a metaphor? What type of figurative language is that? So it says clouds like marshmallows. So that means simile. It's our first one that's simile. There's metaphor, metaphor, metaphor. Finally, simile. Okay, that's it for that page. Pause it if you need to catch up. Page 89, we have a couple more. Okay, number 5, yesterday's homework was a breeze. I don't know if that's one you're familiar with, if you've heard people say that before. If somebody says something was a breeze, that means it was easy, okay? So the homework was easy. It's easy. So it's kind of like saying the homework was a piece of cake. Same thing, right? So did they say like or as? No. So it's a simile. No. Psh, silly me. Metaphor. I'm like explaining why it's not a simile. There's no like, there's no as. Metaphor. Okay, number 6. He cried like a baby. Oh, sad. Okay, so that means he was sad or he cried a lot, right? Babies cry a lot. So I'm going to say he cried a lot. Which isn't a bad thing. Maybe he's crying happy tears. Okay, is that a simile or a metaphor? So we're comparing how he cried to how a baby cries, and it uses the word like. So that's a simile. Okay, so this page was just to review metaphors and similes. It's been a while since we've worked on those. Down at the bottom is a challenge area if you want to work on that. It says if you finish with time remaining, and this is, you know, if we had done this in class together and at your own pace, if you finished early, can you create your own simile or metaphor about an object in the classroom? And let's change this to in your house. Or if you can think back and remember an object from your classroom, that's fine too. So think of something in your house and write a simile or a metaphor about that object. Okay, I'm moving on though, so you can pause and do that and then catch up on the next page. It's kind of a long lesson, so if I'm going quickly, you know, you can pause your video on your phone or tablet or computer, but I need to keep moving. So this is another language review page, but now we're reviewing personification. Okay, this one we have not worked on as much as we did similes and metaphors. So this one may not be something you remember really well, but hopefully when we start talking about it, you'll remember. So personification is when we give human traits to non-human objects. Okay, so if I'm describing the way the trees are blowing in the wind and I say the trees are dancing outside. Okay, trees obviously cannot dance. That's a human trait. Trees don't dance, but they do sway in the wind, they move in the wind because the wind is moving them. They're not doing it themselves, right? So that's personification. I am personifying the trees, and the human characteristic I gave them is dancing. So it's just kind of to make your writing more interesting. So, as an example, they say, windows so small you'd think they were holding their breath. So the object that's being personified are the windows. Windows. Okay? And the human characteristic. So what did they say the windows are doing? That is a human trait. So it says, windows so small you'd think they were holding their breath. Well, windows cannot hold their breath, right? That's a human thing. But that might mean that, you know, they were like tight and stiff. Like when you're holding your breath, you kind of like stiffen up maybe. Okay, so number 1, let's go through some of these. I'm gonna get a piece of paper and cover up some. Kind of, well, there's Loy's name. That was from one of our Zoom meetings. Okay, the sun glared down at him. So what is being personified? That would be the sun. Okay, the sun is the object. And what is the human characteristic they said the sun is doing? So what is the sun doing that a sun can't actually do? That would be glaring down at them. So glaring is like if someone's staring at you but they're kind of frowning, like they look mad at you, that's like glaring. So if you're like mad at your sibling, give them a quick glare for me. glaring slash looking at them. Okay, so obviously the sun doesn't have eyes, it can't look at you, but that would mean that it's like super, super hot out. The sun is just like not hidden behind any clouds or anything. There's no shade, and it's just beating down on you, which is another personification, right? The sun can't beat you. Okay, number 3. The wind danced through the streets. This is similar to the one that I gave you as an example. Okay, so the wind is what's being personified. The wind is the non-human object, or not really an object. You can't hold or see the wind, but you know what I mean. And what is the characteristic they said the wind is doing? That would be dancing. Okay, the wind can't dance. It's, you know, the wind. Hey, except for on Frozen 2, right? The wind danced then. What was her name? Gale? Oh man, now I gotta watch that movie again. Okay. Anyway, sorry, squirrel. That just means that the wind is blowing through the streets, right? Maybe it's moving leaves around like Gale does so that it looks like dancing. Okay, number 3. The phone woke up and rang loudly. So what's being personified? The phone. And what's the human characteristic they said it did? Well, phones do ring loudly, but they can't wake up. Okay, so that just means the phone like turned on, or like if your phone is like just a black screen and it's asleep or something and somebody calls it or your alarm goes off, it wakes up, right? But it doesn't literally like start yawning and wake up and start its day, you know? All right, and last one. The house was depressed and lonely. Okay, so the object is the house. And what did the house do that a house can't really do in real life? Literally. Was depressed. So it felt depressed and lonely. Okay, so maybe that just means it's an empty house. Maybe it's abandoned. So it was depressed and lonely. Okay, so that is our review of personification. There's only 4. The next page, over here, 91. Okay, 91 right here, it says graphing. So that's just this chart down here that we are going to fill out. But it's all about vignette 2, which was my name. So we're gonna go back and read that one again. Maybe just a section of that one, because this all kind of has to do with just one part of it. So I'm gonna flip back to the beginning. Okay, so vignette 2, my name, is on page 6, or technically starts on page 7. So if you want to track with me on page 7, please turn to that page. Either read it by yourself or read it with me. Remember, I think I'm just gonna read part of it. Yep, I'm just gonna read paragraph number 3 and paragraph number 4. Okay, that's the only part that this chart references. Okay, we've read this like a couple times, so I'm just gonna read the part we need. If you want to pause and reread the whole thing, feel free. Read it out loud, read it 10 times, get better with your fluency, race somebody reading it, I don't know. Okay, so paragraph 3. My great-grandmother. I would have liked to have known her, a wild horse of a woman, so wild she wouldn't marry, until my great-grandfather threw a sack over her head and carried her off. Just like that, as if she were a fancy chandelier. That's the way he did it. And the story goes she never forgave him. She looked out the window her whole life, the way so many women sit their sadness on an elbow. I wonder if she made the best with what she got, or was she sorry because she couldn't be all the things she wanted to be? Esperanza. I have inherited her name, but I don't want to inherit her place by the window. Okay, so if we go back to our chart, it's only about how they compared the great-grandmother to a fancy chandelier. Okay, and remember, a chandelier is like a light fixture, like it has jewels and it's very expensive looking and fancy and like something people like a rich house would have like hanging in a big room. Okay, it's all like diamondy. Okay, so back on page 91 is our chart. So they compared the great-grandmother to a chandelier. So this whole column is about the great-grandmother, and this whole column is the chandelier. And this one's completed for us. We just have to write on this side how the chandelier is like the great-grandmother, how a great-grandmother is like the chandelier, okay? And we have to use evidence from the text. So we can write, if we want to take something directly from the text, we can write it in quotation marks like they did here, okay? So for the first one, I'm going to read this side first. I don't know why they put them like this. I feel like the chandelier column should go first. But anyway, chandeliers can be moved by being wrapped in a sack, just as the great-grandmother was carried by a sack being thrown over her head. And the great-grandmother, it says threw a sack over her head. Because remember, the great-grandfather, so her husband, threw a bag over her head and carried her over his shoulder to go get married. So I imagine like she didn't want to get married and he wanted to, so he carried her off to the courthouse and got married, I guess. So on this second one, a chandelier is an object. So how might the great-grandmother be like an object? Okay, so kind of some deep analytical thinking there about that text, okay? So I infer, remember infer is my best guess based on the evidence provided to me in this vignette. My inference is that the great-grandfather maybe treated the great-grandmother like an object, like didn't value her, didn't think of her as a person. She was just an object to him, okay? So that's my thought. If you have a different thought, definitely write it here. Doesn't mean I'm right, just my idea. So maybe great-grandfather treated her like an object. Okay. Remember, you can always pause when you need to. We just have a lot more to go and it's already been almost 20 minutes, so I'm gonna keep going. A chandelier is fancy. So how might the great-grandmother be considered fancy? So again, my thought is that maybe the great-grandfather just thought that the great-grandmother was fancy. Maybe she was beautiful and worth a lot because of how pretty and nice looking she is, like a fancy chandelier, okay? So maybe he thought she was pretty. Pretty like a chandelier. Okay, and last one, we use chandeliers to provide light and to make our rooms look pretty. Okay, because remember, it's like a big light fixture and they look really pretty and fancy. So, chandeliers are used to decorate houses, right? It's not just like, you know, like the lights in my house. They're not to make rooms look pretty. It's not really decoration. It's just, you know, a light bulb. It's just there for the purpose of providing light. But chandeliers are like decorations. They make the room look prettier. So maybe the great-grandfather viewed the great-grandmother as just a decoration. You know, she was just there to look pretty, not really do anything. Maybe she was just decoration in the house, okay? So maybe he thought she was just decoration. Just there to look pretty. And remember, you can write whatever you think. Your inference might be different than mine. But from my inferences that I've written down, it sounds like the great-grandfather didn't really value the great-grandmother very well. Like, didn't see her full worth, because it sounds like she used to be this great person, had all these ambitions, but she kind of got stuck when she got married because he didn't treat her like she should have been treated. Like, she was amazing, right? She was just pretty and there to look pretty, and that's it. Okay. When you're ready, next page. Okay, so these two pages are similar. It's the same task. They give us a phrase, and this is about similes and metaphors again. We have to decide what these things mean, okay? So we'll complete it together. They're gonna give us a phrase. Let's decide if it's a simile or a metaphor, and then answer the questions on this side of the chart. We'll put our answers here. Okay, same thing for the little reddish orange chart on the other side. So this one is a phrase from the vignette, My Name, the one we just read again, or part of it. Sit their sadness on an elbow. Okay, is that a metaphor or a simile? Well, it doesn't say like or as, so I'm gonna say it's a metaphor. All right, so first question in this box, it says, thinking about the phrase sitting on an elbow, what does that look like? Where would the person's weight be? So if you're sitting on an elbow, it means, I guess I can show you what it means. Hold on. Let me take you off my fancy system. Okay. Whoa, that's zoomed in. Hello. Okay, sitting on an elbow is like this. Like what I always tell you guys not to do in class. Okay. It's like when you're like this. I'm like, hey guys, you have necks. Like it'll do the job where it'll hold your head up for you. You don't have to hold it. This is sitting your head on your elbow. Sitting your sadness on an elbow, okay? Usually it's like one of those, okay? That's what this looks like. So back to our workbook. I'll get you back on my little recording setup there. Okay, so that's what that looks like. How do we describe that? Okay, what does it look like? You could say leaning on an elbow or something. Head in an elbow. Head in your hand, leaning on your elbow. Okay. Now think about the phrase, sitting your sadness on an elbow. So how might people sitting that way look? Would their shoulders be hunched or straight up? So like their posture, are they sitting straight up or are they kind of hunched over and like leaning over? Would they look down, up, or straight ahead? Would they be frowning, smiling, or something else? Describe how such a person would look. So there's a lot of questions in this. We'll just try to answer most of them or all of them in just short little sentences, okay? So feel free to write your own description about what that looks like. You should be familiar with it because daily I would tell you guys in class to not do it because you have necks. Necks hold your heads up, not your hand and your elbow. Okay. So how might people sitting that way look? Would their shoulders be hunched or straight up? I imagine shoulders hunched. Hunched. That's a C, sorry. And I'm going to say slumped over. It's like when you're leaning over like a bump on a log. Slumped over. Are they looking down, up, or straight ahead? So probably looking down in my imagination, or when I think back to you guys in class, would they be frowning, smiling, or something else? Maybe frowning. Looking bored. Oops, that's me. Bored or sad. Okay, so that's just my description. You can write the same thing, add your ideas, take out something, change it however you want. Okay, this part. Close your eyes and imagine where the person is. Is that person in a room or outside? What is the person sitting on and looking at? So there's a hint also. So this is talking about, remember the vignette that we read about the great-grandmother and where Esperanza got her name. So look at the last words in this paragraph. I don't want to inherit her place by the window. Does that give you clues about where the great-grandmother might have been looking, might have been, and where she would have been looking? So remember, the great-grandmother is sitting in the window and her head is in her hand, like how I showed you just a second ago, and she's looking out the window, okay? But we don't have to write exactly that. That's your own imagination, right? So close your eyes, imagine where the person is. So whatever you're picturing, describe it here. Are they in a room or outside? Are they sitting on something? Are they looking at something? What are they looking through? So whatever you want to put right here. In my imagination, I'm just picturing all you guys in class, like zoning out. Hopefully no one's doing that right now. So, in a room, looking out the window. That's what I'm picturing, but this is your imagination, right? Whatever you feel for that one, okay? So pause it, catch up, finish that part. We have one more of these real quick, and then the last part of our lesson. This is a long one, but I think 6 will be short, so that's good. Okay, page 93. This is the same thing. They give us a phrase. We have to decide if it's a simile or a metaphor and describe what it means. So if you want to go back and reread vignette 3, that one's a smart cookie. That one was when Esperanza's mom is talking to her about stay in school, you know, because I used to be smart, but look what happened to me. So if you want to go back and read that one again, definitely go back and do that. It is on page, I think 9. Nope, 10 and 11. Page 10 and 11. Well, that's where it starts. I think it goes to 12, actually. Okay, so read that one again if you can't remember it. But the one phrase that we're talking about for this one, the phrase that we're analyzing, is this. She used to draw when she had time. And the she that we're talking about is the mother. So she used to draw when she had time. Now she draws with a needle and thread, little knotted rosebuds, tulips made of silk thread. Okay, so the part that we're asking about, this metaphor or simile, is this. She draws with a needle and thread. Okay, so there's no like or as. They're comparing how she draws to drawing with a needle and thread, so that is also a metaphor. If you don't remember that part, or you don't remember that from the lesson before, I was telling you guys that, well, we're answering that. It means she's sewing, like she's stitching or embroidery. She's doing cross stitch. That's what that means. So you can say sewing or embroidery. Okay, so that's the literal activity she's doing. She's not drawing with a needle and thread. Like, if you have a needle and thread, how would you draw with that, right? So what that means literally is that she's sewing and making pictures with the needle and thread on the fabric, okay? If you want, if you can. You can pause this or afterwards, but Google like cross stitching because they make like amazing pictures. It's incredible what people can do with that. Okay, next part. Why would someone draw rosebuds and tulips with a needle and thread? So why would somebody draw flowers with needle and thread? Why would somebody sew flowers? Hint, women used to sometimes have jobs as seamstresses, so sewing to earn money. Seamstresses sewed things. So maybe that's her job. Maybe she does that as work and not for like a fun hobby. Because this says she used to draw when she had time. So maybe when she had time for hobbies, she used to draw. But now she has to do embroidery for work. Maybe it's her job. And that's just my inference, but if you have a different one, that's totally fine too. Okay. In the next sentence, Esperanza says her mother did other things when she had time. What might that mean? So now she doesn't have time to do all those fun things. Maybe now she's busy and doesn't have time to draw. Okay. So maybe she is too busy now. Okay, so go ask your mom what her hobbies used to be before she had kids. And maybe your mom does those hobbies still. Maybe she doesn't. That's because moms are busy, okay? So Esperanza's mom used to draw and do other things when she had time. Now she doesn't have time because she's taking care of all the kids, and maybe she has a job as a seamstress, okay? All right, so the rest of this is like partner stuff where you explain all this, but we did it together. So we're skipping these bottom little sections. And the last thing we're doing for this is setting up for a writing assignment. It's been 32 minutes, so if you need to like pause, stand up, take a break, do a go noodle real quick, that'd be fun. That's what we would normally do in class. This isn't gonna take too long, but I know it's been a long lesson so far. So, we're gonna start planning a story that you guys are gonna be writing. So this is the planning page. This is a graphic organizer to get ready for working on our stories. So in the next lesson, we start writing our story, and we're gonna be adding to it in the next, week or 2 weeks. So this is about aspirations or goals that you have in your life. But the fun part is you can decide whether you want it to be about you and your goals for your life. So your actual goals. What do you actually want to do when you're older? Maybe it's about college, jobs. Maybe you want to be a famous YouTuber like me. So it can be about you. So it could be nonfiction, or it can be fictional. It can be a made-up story about made-up characters and made-up aspirations about their lives. Okay, so those are your choices. Okay, so in this activity, you will start working on your own stories of aspiration. You'll continue working on these stories tomorrow and next week. Yep. Okay, first decide whether you want to write nonfiction or fiction. So nonfiction is about you. Fiction is made up characters. Either way, you can decide. If you write nonfiction, so if you write about you, the story will be about you and your real aspirations, so your real goals. If you write fiction, it can still be about you, but you will invent things about your life, your aspirations, and your actions. You can also write about someone completely different if you choose fiction. So this one, the nonfiction, is you and your real goals. Fiction can be, I guess, about you, but made up goals. So maybe it's going to be you're the main character, but it's not your real goals. Maybe if I write mine about me, but I want to grow up to be a unicorn. Okay, so that would obviously be fiction. Or I want to grow up to be, I don't really want to be Elsa. I want to be Anna. She has more fun. Okay, now decide what your or your character's aspirations are. What do you or your character want from life that is different from today? So, what do you or your character want from life? And this doesn't have to be about jobs, right? Maybe you don't have any career and job aspirations just yet, and that's totally fine. You don't have to know what you want to be when you grow up yet. Eventually decide, please. But maybe it's just a different kind of aspiration or goal. Maybe you want to be a soccer player, like the example, or maybe you want to travel. Maybe you want to rescue a bunch of dogs. Okay, it doesn't have to be about jobs. It can be whatever kind of aspirations and goals you want to write about. And if you have those kind of goals, write them. That's fine. So your story will tell us what you or your character's aspirations are and how you or your character works to achieve them. So how are you working towards your goals? Today you will write tomorrow, not today. Eventually, next lesson. You'll write the first chapter with the setting and the first encounter with another person. This is just like the first vignette you read, The House on Mango Street. So remember Esperanza, it introduced her in a lot of detail and talked about all the houses, and her aspiration is to have a house. She wants a nice house. That is her big goal, okay? So if you want to reread it for help, you definitely can. So first we're planning our chapter. So the character's aspirations. So the character's goal. What do they want? Okay, and for an example, it's he wanted to be a soccer player. I feel like before we should even talk about that, who's your character? So right here in this space, and maybe you need to pause and think about this for a while first and like decide what you want to write about. Maybe you don't have like an idea just yet, and that's fine. Pause it, think about it, come back to this. And this can be like, if this is going to take you a long time to plan this, do this later. That's fine. We've already been working for like 40 minutes. But eventually, we need this planned before we can get to the next lesson. So who's your character? Is it you? In which case you would just write me. Or are you going to make up a story about another person? And in which case they need a name. You need to name your character. Okay, so who is your main character? Okay, once you figure that part out, what is their aspiration? What is your character's goal in life? What do they want? Okay, so you could say, I want, or he wants, or she wants. Okay, but decide on one. So not all three, right? If you're writing about you, if you're writing about a boy character, if you're writing about a girl character. The next box is setting. So lots of details. Setting is the where and the when your story takes place. So is it in the future? Is it in the present? Like happening now? Where is it happening? If this is a nonfiction story about you, it's happening in Alaska. If it's a fictional story, maybe it's happening in Seattle or California, wherever you want it to happen, okay? On the next page, people the character met. Okay, and for example, same example as up here, if you're writing a story about somebody who wanted to be a soccer player, maybe somebody in your story that your main character is going to meet is the soccer coach. Okay, that makes sense, right? So, who will your character meet? Maybe you'll have like 2 or 3 people. Okay, those are just little bullets because you're going to write somebody's name or title for them. Okay, so if my goal in life was to travel the world, okay, if that's what I'm writing about, then the people my character meets would be maybe the flight attendant on a flight that I'm going on. Maybe somebody I meet is a fellow traveler, lost or something. And then maybe I meet my dog when I come back home. Okay, maybe that's how my story will go. But who are some of the people your main character is going to meet? That's for that box. Sensory details. So there's definitely not enough space for how many sensory details you should have. But remember, sensory details is your 5 senses. So what they saw, what they heard, what they touched, what they smelled, what they tasted. Okay, senses, your 5 main senses. So what are some things they saw and heard and touched, smelled and tasted? That will all depend on what your story is going to be like, what your aspirational goal is. Okay? Dialogue. So you should include dialogue in your story, even if it's nonfiction, okay? What the character said to the person he or she met, how the person responded. So this person, one of these people, what did you guys talk about in your story? Okay, dialogue. Remember, that's quotations. Oh, and remember, it can be positive or negative. It doesn't have to be like a good interaction. Remember back at in the vignette that we read, the House on Mango Street one, when she met up with her nun teacher on the sidewalk near her house, the nun was like very judgy about where she left or where she lived. So it doesn't have to be like a positive thing. They don't have to be like encouraging about your goals. Whatever kind of story you want. For this one, what the character felt, thought, learned because of this conversation. So this conversation that happens between your main character and this person, how did they feel? What did they learn? So remember, Esperanza felt ashamed of where she lived because of this conversation with the nun at her school. Okay? And how did that link to his or her aspirations? So that made Esperanza want to live in a better house. So that kind of pushed her goal forward. And then optional is figurative language you would like to include. So if you can include a metaphor or a simile, like what we just practiced, add that, okay? That is an optional thing. All the rest is mandatory, has to be in your chapter or in your story, but just extra would be a metaphor or a simile, okay? So I know this will take a lot of thinking, a lot of writing, because there's a lot of boxes and there's not really a lot of space, but this is at least planning for your first chapter, okay? And in the next video, we will be writing that chapter. So put a lot of thought into this, please. This story is gonna be written in a couple of lessons, so it should be something that you're proud of. And I'm proud of all of you. Goodbye.